Good evening, NNJR. I'm Shannon Muller. Thank you for joining me tonight. With me, I have Rudy Samsel from our membership committee. I have Ross Bentley, author and race car driver of Speed Secrets. We have Bill Gilbert, who will be our moderator for the evening. Thank you, Bill. Hope everyone is out enjoying the beginning of spring. I understand we've already had a couple great events, Porsches and pastries being a huge hit, as well as the DE that took place over the weekend down at NJMP. Very disappointed I missed that due to my second shot, but hope to see everybody at the next event. And wanted to let Rudy have some time to tell us about what's going on with membership. Hi, Rudy.
Hi, thanks, Shannon. I appreciate it. Welcome, Ross and Bill. Thank you. So I want to thank everyone, if there's new members on, who did attend our first Porsches and Pastries event a couple weeks ago. Really was a big success. I think we're going to look at that formula a little bit more here through the summer. And the next upcoming event for the new members that are on is really, it's not a new member event per se. It's for all members, but it's called the Welcome to the Club. And historically, what that's about is it's a way of introducing new members to Concours in the morning, where you can clean your car, and then in the afternoon, a great rally by John Vogt and Peter. Of course, with COVID-19 restrictions going on, it's a little bit different this year. It's more of a car show. People won't be cleaning their cars, but at least you can get there and get to see what it's like. And then I highly recommend the rally. Unfortunately, due to personal reasons, Nancy and I won't be able to attend that event. But I'm sure John and Kevin and Hubert are all putting together a great event for mid-May. That's the next one coming up. I think we're anxiously awaiting, as restrictions continue to open up, that you'll see more stuff on the calendar. So my recommendation is always to check the calendar frequently on the NNJR website. And I didn't start out by apologizing for Nancy, who could not be on tonight, but she sends her love. And as always, she's the brains of this outfit. If you have any questions, email her and she'll be quick to answer them. And whatever she can't answer, she forwards to me. And usually if I don't know the answer, we can get you to the person that does. So with that, I don't want to hold up any longer and let you take it from there.
Okay, thanks a lot, Rudy.
Absolutely.
And Nancy, all that you do for the club. Okay, so how about Ross and Bill take it away? Please type your questions into the YouTube chat box, and Bill will be monitoring those, and I'll let you guys get started.
Great. Well, thanks, Shannon. And let me add my welcome to Ross. Ross is such a wealth of driving information that I often quote Ross's books and other Speed Secrets sources. And I'm a big fan of his approach to driving, which will surprise no one on this call who's listened to me talk about driving before. So with that, we're going to dive right in, Ross. So I have a question from, this applies more to, drivers with some experience, intermediate, advanced drivers. And this driver asked in one of the questions I got before this session, how do I break the habit of trail braking too much, too much or too long? And if your experience, Ross, is like mine, often when I ride with drivers who have a fair amount of experience, they're carrying the brakes too deeply or too much into a corner. So this driver, having experienced that, is asking, how do I break myself of that, let's call it a bad habit?
Well, starting off with the good questions, right? And first of all, thanks for inviting me to do this, because as you know, Bill, I love talking about driving almost as much as I love driving. So this will be fun. That's a really interesting question, because I typically find that there are two kinds of drivers: those who don't trail brake enough and those who trail brake too much. In this case, it's too much. And what that's doing, obviously, is just it's likely overslowing the car. I would say that I was going to say 9 times out of 10, but I have no statistical reason for saying that. But a majority of the time that the driver tends to hang on the brakes too long and trail brake too deep into the corner is because their eyes are not up enough, and they're not thinking about the end of the corner yet. I actually just talked about this in a podcast and things, but this whole idea of driving with the end in mind. And I think if you're approaching a corner and as you're entering a corner and your mind at the turning point is already thinking about the exit point of the corner, I think it helps you get your foot off the brake pedal. And so I would say that's the first part of it. And Bill, you used a good word there, a habit. You know, a lot of people do things that they don't even know they're doing because it's a habit. It's as I call it, it's a mental program. It's something that, you know, I would say we do what we do because we're programmed to do so, or we don't do what we want because we haven't been programmed yet to do that. In this case, the driver has the program for keeping their foot on the brakes well into the corner. So you got to break that habit. I would say that if I was at the track with that driver right now, I would have that driver, and I was not in the car or anything like that. I'd just say to the driver, and let's say it's you, Bill. I'd say, hey, Bill, what I want you to do this session is all I want you to do is I want you to focus on where you're releasing the brake pedal and how quickly you're releasing the brake pedal. Just go on the track and run a session of 20 minutes or 15 or 25 minutes or whatever the length of that session, but focus the entire time just on becoming more aware of what you're doing with the brake release. And obviously this driver is aware enough to know that they are trail braking too much. But if you really just go on the track and start becoming more aware of it, and you really think about just what's happening with my foot when I get, you know, as I turn into the corner, am I coming off the pedal quickly? Am I coming off it really slow? Am I keeping the same pressure on way into the corner and then kind of going, oh, now there's the rest of the corner up ahead. I better drive out of this. And if you just really focus on becoming more aware of that, again, I was going to say 9 times out of 10, but I don't know the statistics. But many, many more, way more than half the time, drivers will then start to realize and start to play with and change the way they release the brake and come off the brake pedal. So, the two things to sort of recap is focus more on looking through and mentally looking through to the exit point, and then spend a session of just becoming more aware of what you're doing with the brake pedal. And actually deliberately one time come off the brake pedal quickly and just see what happens with the car. And so playing with that will make a difference. Going back to the vision thing, and sorry to get caught up on this one, but it's such an important one, I think. One of the other reasons why people don't look at the exit of the corner is they're kind of tense. You know, there's some anxiety of coming to the corner and going, whoa, I'm going fast in here. I'm going to just keep on my foot on the brake and all the way into the corner. And then again go, oh, look at all the corner, all the track up ahead of me. So again, if you get your eyes up more and you look through the corner more, you tend to be less tense and therefore are more relaxed, and you can move the muscles in your body a whole lot better. So hopefully that helps answer that question, Bill.
No, that's right on. That's definitely helpful. A follow-up question that just came in on YouTube. Should I brake on all corners on all different types of cars? The all corners is more, I think, a little more basic question, but all different types of cars, mid-engine, rear engine, front engine, whatever, is a little more sophisticated. But yeah, jump in on that one.
So should I trail brake in every car, in every corner? The simple answer is no. There are corners where you don't want to trail brake whatsoever. You want to release the brake pedal, and maybe just to take a step back, what is trail braking, right? I'll use my little car model back here. As you're coming into the brake zone, if the braking is coming in here like this, braking to somewhere after the turn-in point here, let's say that's the turn-in point right there, anytime that you're on the brake pedal, even just a little bit coming off the brake pedal. So you could be right there. That's trail braking. That tiny little bit right there past the turning point, you're trail braking.
Mhm.
So is that. That's trail braking. So anything in between, that's trail braking. So there are corners, and unlike this tight hairpin type corner, if it was a very fast sweeping corner that you just had to do a little bit of a brake for, then in that corner, I would say as a guideline, and not a rule, but just a guideline, I would say release the brake pedal sooner and maybe no trail braking whatsoever. Whereas if it's a corner like this, where it's a very tight corner and you need to get the car to change direction a lot, you would trail brake more. So those are, I guess, very, very general guidelines. The tighter the corner, the more you need to change the direction of the car, the more you're going to trail brake. The faster the corner, meaning the bigger, longer sweeping corner, where you don't need to change direction quite so much, in that case, you would trail brake less. So then we get to the next step of this is, yeah, but what if I'm driving a front wheel drive car or a rear engine car or a mid engine car or whatever? First of all, there are no, physics applies equally to all cars. Any car that has 4 tires on it, physics applies the same way. You could have just as much difference between a front wheel drive car and a front engine rear wheel drive car as you do between a rear engine rear wheel drive car and a all wheel drive car. You could have all those, there can be just as much difference between any of those. So I think if somebody comes along and says, the blanket statement is, in a front wheel drive car, you trail brake more or less. And in a rear engine car, you trail brake more or less. Nah, they're wrong. There is no blanket statement that can say that. Your job as a driver is to adapt to the car. And the reason we trail brake is, first of all, to kind of manage the load on the front end of the car. So if we need more load on the front end of the car to help us get the car to turn more, we trail brake more. That applies in a front wheel drive car, rear wheel drive car, all wheel drive car, front engine, mid engine, rear engine, you name it, that applies. You just have to adapt how much you're going to trail brake to get the car to change direction there. So, Bill, I know I hate answering questions with it depends, but the answer to this one is it depends. Depends on the shape of the corner, how tight it is, how much you need to change the direction of the car, and how well your car changes direction. If your car tends to not change direction very well, and I hope nobody reads into this too much the wrong way, but a very front heavy car, meaning let's say a heavy big engine up front, that car wants to keep going straight. You turn the wheel and there's kind of that, it's the opposite of the rear engine pendulum effect. It's the I want to keep going straight effect. And in that car, you might have more difficulty getting the car to change direction. In that case, you might trail brake a little bit more in that car. If you've got a car that tends to, you kind of turn the wheel and it already turns and changes direction, you're going to trail brake less in that. But there is no, all rear engine cars, all front engine cars, all front wheel drive cars, all rear drive, do any of those things. You have to read what the car is going to do and then adapt how you trail brake or how much you trail brake to the car.
Great. Thank you for that. So you mentioned earlier that sometimes people over brake or over slow because they kind of get into the corner and really want to slow down. So a follow-up question related to that says, I find myself tensing at times while on track, which puts a lot of stress on the body and mind. What, if anything, could I do to help?
So going back to what I said earlier around we do what we do because we're programmed to do so, build the programming to relax. And I know that sounds really simple, but and in fact, it is kind of simple. I tell the story of years and years ago how I was driving down the highway with a friend of mine and we came to a freeway off ramp and I came off the freeway off ramp. And as we're going around the corner, my friend says to me, "You're a weird." And I was like, okay. But in this case, I said, why? What makes me weird here? And he said, why do you breathe like that? And I was like, well, I'm practicing. And every single time that I would come to a freeway off ramp, a fast sweeping corner coming off a highway, or any other kind of corner on a highway or something like that, I would deliberately exhale because I was practicing breathing. So I'd come up to that and just go as I drove through the corner. Well, I've got to the point where now, I mean, I drive on the street, whatever. I drive on a racetrack. Every time I come to a corner, I go, and when you're exhaling, your body relaxes. You're absolutely right that if you tense up your body, you're not going to be able to drive as well. And a lot of times that is you hold your breath because going into any corner fast, there's a certain amount of anxiety and it triggers a little program in our brain that says, and we hold our breath, we tense our body up. We actually then get less feedback through the steering wheel and the car and everything else. Mm-hmm. So we need to turn that around and build the mental programming or habit to breathe when we're driving. So the first step I would say is when you're driving on the street, deliberately exhale every single time you come to and go through a corner. Just go as you go around a city intersection street, making a left-hand turn, go. And then it'll just become a habit. And that's what you're going to do on the track as well. And by the way, your friends can call you weird. Welcome to my world.
That's great. I love that. I love that tip. That's great. So next question that came in relates more to, instructing, coaching, and so on. What's the most important thing that a driving coach can do?
Wow. That's a big question. The most important thing, because immediately I go to develop a relationship with the person you're training. And by relationship, I mean, you want to build some level of trust between the two of you. And the more you can start the conversation and get the person trusting you and you trusting them, the sooner the progress is gonna occur. The second part of that I was thinking about is immediately think about communication skills. And so I think that's a really important thing. Oh, most important. Actually, you know what I'm going to say? The most important thing is be a learner yourself. You cannot be a great teacher, trainer, coach, instructor, whatever, if you're not a learner yourself. And I remember when I started reading a lot of writing books. And the very first thing that every single author in the world will ever tell you, if you want to be a good writer, you have to read. Well, to be a good teacher, you have to learn. And you have to love learning. And I think, therefore, you have an open mind and you then end up having this, that actually helps you build your relationship. I don't think there's very many people in the world who like to be talked down to. So if you can go into it and develop the relationship of, in this case, Bill, it's, hey, Bill, let's work together on this. Let's work together on you progressing and developing as a driver. This is going to be really fun. We're both going to learn a lot from doing this. I think that's not a bad way to start off a relationship. So
that's great.
With a relationship, communication, and being a learner. Those are the three things that immediately popped to mind.
Okay.
I don't know if somebody was hoping I would come back and say, talk about apexes. Well, okay.
So actually, a follow-up question, given exactly that comment, was, how much of what you do as a driving coach is really counseling or advising your clients as opposed to driving skills? You just mentioned apex. So how much of it is nuts and bolts versus, sort of the programming, to use your term?
How long is a piece of string?
Okay.
So it depends on the driver. And, you would think that with a very new driver, a novice driver, you would think that it would be more technical, in which case, it's, here's the references, here's where you brake, here's where you turn in the corner, that kind of thing. And maybe more with an advanced driver, it becomes more of a counseling, getting in the right state of mind, all those kinds of things. And even a few years ago, I think I would have mostly agreed with that statement, but I think now I'd say it just depends, because I have worked with novices that their first day on the track fairly recently, not last year, unfortunately, but fairly recently, where they understood the technical part of driving. What I needed to do was help them relax, help them take some pressure off, help them build confidence. And therefore I would say I was spending more time on the mental side of driving than on the technical side of it. And I have worked with elite level, top, highly paid professional drivers where I'm talking about turning points and apexes. So it's I think, maybe this is one of the other things about being a good coach is you have to, one of your number one priorities is strategizing. And part of that is prioritizing. And it's kind of taking that step back and going, what does this driver need the most? Do they need to know where the apex of turn 3 is? Or do they need to breathe and relax as they're going through turn 3? And so maybe going back to the previous question, maybe that's the fourth thing is being able to read what's the priority for the driver at this moment in time.
Great.
And one of the fun things about coaching is you're constantly juggling these things.
Right. So just to flip that question around, so if you're the driver, the student being coached or instructed, what's the best or biggest thing they can do to help their instructor or coach help them?
I think the main thing is just don't be afraid to ask or tell your instructor what it is that you want or need. And I think, it's difficult when I think a lot of people, when they go to the track, they are intimidated, and it's hard not to be intimidated. Imagine, and for those of you who are more experienced that are on this call, think about your first few times you were at the track and just how much anxiety, tension, pressure that you felt, and kind of put yourself back into that world again. So I think the key there is, as a student, just don't be afraid to ask. And the best students I've ever had, as soon as I start talking to them about working with them, I'll ask the question around what's the best way to help you learn, and we can get into a whole thing around learning styles and things like that, which sometimes can be overdone. But as a student, just tell your instructor, hey, can you show me more things? I don't hear very well. Don't be afraid to say that. If you do, just you don't need to show me pictures. Just talk to me as I'm driving around. Or if the instructor is talking to you while driving around and you're finding it's starting to distract you, you can just say, hey, can you just turn down the amount of information you're giving me right now? Because I'm feeling a little bit of brain overload. So I think the simple answer is be honest with yourself and with the instructor, and ask the instructor, tell them what you want, because that's going to help you learn quicker.
Okay, great. So somewhat related to that, I'm not sure there's a single answer to this, but I'll be curious to what you think. What's the biggest thing, the biggest block that gets in the way of drivers learning, especially, less experienced drivers?
Well, the single biggest thing is showing up knowing everything there is to know about driving. And I am so excited that someday I'm going to meet that person that really does know everything there is to know about driving, because I'm dying to meet that person. No, I think the single biggest thing is simply just showing up and not being completely open, not just with the knowledge side of it, the technical side of it, but like I said, being okay with saying, man, turn 5 kind of scares me. I feel pretty intimidated by that. Or this whole experience, I'm feeling a little intimidated. I look in the mirrors and there's a Fiat 500. Sorry if anybody drives a Fiat 5. There's a little Fiat 500 that's all over my rear bumper, and I've got this $300,000 McLaren. Don't be afraid to say that's intimidating me. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just being open-minded, and then just being open-minded to that, and knowing that there's always more. Yeah.
Great. So I'm going to shift gears to the next question, which is, how has the use of data changed driver development and the role of coaches? And the follow-on is, will we ever not have coaches or instructors in the car? Presumably because of data and such.
So every now and then I kind of wonder, what does a guy like AJ Foyt or Mario Andretti think of data? That, because I was well into my career when data systems started. I think the first data system I used was in 1993, a Pi data system in an Indy car. And that was pretty magical, just being able to look at what the speeds were and that kind of thing. So, so there are pros and cons, I believe, to data and video even. And where I struggle with data and coaching is, there are coaches who will say, let me go and do a lap in your car, and then we'll get my data, and then you go and do a lap, and then we'll look at our data, and that will just tell me where you need to go faster. And there is some value in that. Some people learn very well by copying. But a lot of times what happens there is the driver learns how to copy, but they don't learn what it takes to make that happen. Mm-hmm. So I can go out and do a lap, and Bill, let's say I'm a freak of nature, I went faster than you. So you could then look at my data and go, you're going 4 miles an hour faster through that corner. So you go 4 miles an hour faster. But have you really sensed that the car has the ability to go 4 miles an hour faster? Maybe not. Quite likely you haven't. You're simply just copying what I did. And maybe in the process you learn that, oh, the car does that. But there's a big difference between learning through copying and learning kind of through your own. I like to think about it as, it's kind of learning from the outside in, meaning I just give you this information and you go and do something with it, rather than you learning from the inside out. And if you think about through your life, how many times you've learned something where somebody gives you the answer, and a day or a month or a year later, you don't remember what the answer is. But if you figured out the answer, that answer stuck with you forever. So I think that's one of the downsides of data, when it gets overused of simply, well, I'm just going to go and copy what that driver did. So I think that's the downside. The flip side of that, the pro of that is it's just another tool that helps us dig down and get finer and finer with the improvements we're making. I kind of going back to the AJ Foyt, Mario Andretti days. I wonder, you watch stuff of them driving in the early days and you think they're on the ragged edge. But I wonder if they were as much on the ragged edge as drivers are today, because we know where the ragged edge really is. So I think there's some great value there. The other kind of pros and cons of data systems, I see drivers spend a lot of money on data systems. I was actually just at the track at VAR a couple months ago. I had a group of people and I said, how many of you have data systems? And 8 people put their hand up, and I go, how many of you use it? And not one hand went up. And I said, well, why not? And they go, it's just too difficult. I got to pull up my laptop. I got to plug it in. I got to download it. And then I look at all these lines and I'm like, I don't know what it all means. And I've had people that say, I've had a data system for 5 years and I've never really looked at the lines of the squiggly lines. So there is that downside, that it takes time away from, depending on what type of motorsport you're involved in and what your goals are, maybe it's more important to go socialize with your buddies at the track than it is to look at squiggly lines on a computer screen. So those are the pros and cons. I think to the second part of the question of will instructors / coaches be, will they be replaced entirely by data and video systems in the future? I do not believe so. I think the data and video systems will certainly enhance the job of an instructor or coach. I can tell you personally right now, so a few months ago, so I coach a driver that's racing an LMP2 car in the IMSA WeatherTech Championship. We were testing at Sebring, I guess it was late February, beginning of March, prior to the 12-hour race. And with the technology that I have as a coach now, I actually did a little test. I went and stood in my hotel room with certain technology and could coach the driver in real time live as well as I could have been if I'd been standing on a corner or anywhere else. The piece that's not quite 100% there yet is when the driver gets out of the car, I need to look in the driver's eyes and I need to have the question. Now, people could go, you can do it on a Zoom call now. Yeah, it's getting pretty darn close to that. But there's certain body language and things like that that's still valuable. And I think that's part of it will still continue on. But, there are tools out there. Don't want to sound like an ad, but that Garmin Catalyst that I was actually involved with some of the development on, it is an incredible tool that can enhance the job of an instructor. So will it replace us? I don't believe so. Not for a long time. I'm still planning on doing this for another 85 years.
Good. Well, that makes two of us. That's good.
Yeah.
So another shift of gears. Someone's asking, Peter's asking, in regard, if I were thinking about getting a racing license, would you recommend a school or 8 to 10 PCA DE events?
Wow. How politically correct do I need to be? No. In the perfect world, I'd say both, because there are the problem with any DE, professional school, whatever, is there's a little bit of luck of the draw in that who do you get as an instructor? And that can make a massive difference. And that's not a knock against the effectiveness of an instructor, but sometimes you get the best instructor, but that instructor just doesn't connect with you, as I talked about earlier on. And that relationship just doesn't build that way, I guess. So that for that reason, I can't say one's going to be better than the other. If you had a better instructor in the PCA DE thing, that would be better. If you had a better instructor in the pro school thing, that would be better. The one thing is, if you're going to go racing, one of the things that some of the club DE programs don't do enough of is work around racecraft. Some of the pro schools do a fantastic job of that. Some of them don't do that much of it. So if your goal is to get a competition of racing license, then I would look at where am I going to get more than just how do I drive fast, but how do I race? And there are some schools that will walk you through the process of what happens when you sign up for a race? What happens when you show up and you got to go through tech inspection? What happens at the driver's meeting? They go through all of those things, and that will help you more than 85 days at a DE event with none of that, or 85 days at a pro school. So I personally would look at what's going to help you learn what you need to learn. If you're already a relatively fast driver, then you don't need to be learning how to go faster. You need to learn how to go racing. And it's a different technique, a different skill.
Okay, great. So here's a question from a different Peter. And he's asking, how can you safely determine the limits of your car? And I guess I would add to that of yourself as a driver, but he's asking how do you safely determine the limits, which Doug chimed in that he'd love to hear the answer to that as well. So.
Okay, so Peter and Doug are beating up on me here. So that's one of the, I guess, the all-time classic questions and one of the most difficult ones to put into words. But I would say that, so a few things. At a certain point, it comes down to your car control skills. And anytime on a skid pad or any kind of loose surface training like rally school kind of thing, that will help you learn what the car does when it's at its limits. So that's kind of the first step. Is the car going to push? Is it going to get loose? What am I going to do with the steering? Where am I going to be looking? That kind of thing. And skid pads and loose surface training tend to happen at a lower speed, and it happens longer. So, if you go to a rally school and you're driving in gravel, you get into an oversteer and it's like oversteer, 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 oversteer. Okay. Whereas on a racetrack, sometimes on a dry racetrack, it's oversteer. Whoa, what was that? Like by the time you recognize it was there, it's over with. Or it's over with all the way around like this. So, the first step to me when somebody says, how do I get there, is I would do some car control skills training, which can be skid pad or loose surface training, like on dirt or something like that. There comes a point in time where you need to be comfortable enough knowing that when the car steps out, it does something. I have the ability to correct for that. I would say that most drivers who don't drive the limits, they don't trust themselves to be able to correct when the car goes over the limit. And if you need to get to the point where you can take small steps. And if I said to you, you need to carry more speed through turn 3, and you go from 50 miles an hour to 60 miles an hour, that's too big a step. And I've heard people say there's the rule of 6 miles an hour. Never increase your speed by more than 6 miles an hour at a time. Because if it's 5 miles an hour at a time, if you're 5 miles an hour faster than you've ever been before, you're probably going to catch it. If you're 6 miles an hour faster, you're probably not going to catch it. I don't know where that number comes from, but it's an interesting concept of if you're trying to go faster and you find yourself taking little bites and you happen to have data or something that shows that your speed just went up 3 miles an hour, then I would trust yourself, knowing that 3 miles an hour faster and the car steps out or slides a little bit more, maybe you're going to make a mess of that corner, but you're not going to go off the track and crash. But if you're making steps that are like 10 miles an hour difference, you need to fine tune your ability to adjust speed better. So then, as you're going through a corner, you can test the limits a little bit. So as you're going through a corner and you feel like you're, pretty much at the limit, if you just kind of tighten up the steering a little bit and you just turn the wheel, and if the car just immediately responds, you're not quite at the limit yet. If you turn the wheel and it kind of responds, but it kind of slides a little bit, you're pretty much at the limit. If you turn the steering wheel and there's no response, it just keeps sliding, then you're over the limit. So you can test those limits a little bit. Now, I know I watch videos of some drivers and they're going through corners and they're doing this all the way through the corner. And I'll ask them, what are you doing? And they're going, I'm trying to feel the limits of the car. No, you're not. You're just upsetting the balance of the car doing that. Because this isn't going to really get any feel. If you're going through a corner and you kind of just tighten the wheel up and then bring it back, like about that much timing, that you're going to be able to feel. And you're going to be able to go, okay, the car moved, it moved a little bit, or it didn't move at all. That's going to tell you. You can kind of do the same thing in a rear-wheel drive car with a throttle or a front-wheel drive car with a throttle, of just feeding in throttle just a little bit harder than you did before and noticing what happens to the car. And, if nothing happens other than you accelerate more, then you're not quite at the limit yet, or you're right close to that limit. But if you give it some throttle and either front-wheel drive car, the car understeers more, or you might get a little power oversteer, or you might even cause some power understeer, then you know that you're getting closer to the limits. So I guess to recap that, I'd start with building car control skills, on loose surface or slippery surface, and then start to figure out how small or what's the increments of your going faster. If it's, I can brake 3 feet later for a corner, I can carry 2 miles an hour more through a corner, and I know the difference of that, then you just got to trust yourself that you have that ability to control. If you go 2, 3, 4 miles an hour faster through a corner, you're not going to crash. You're going to have the ability to control that. But if you're making big steps, those increments are big, then you're not quite ready to push that. And then, like I said, test it a little bit with some steering, test it a little bit with some throttle.
Right. Okay, great. That's terrific stuff. So perhaps a corollary to that, we had Peter Krause talk at our instructor seminar and our driver seminar this year, like you've done a couple of times for us in the past, although this time it was on Zoom, but it was still fun. One of the things he described, which I really liked, was he talked about go, no go. When you make an input, whether it's steering or gas or whatever, if everything's the way it should be, it's go. If something's wrong, it's no go. So I want to tie that back for a moment to your comments about the limit, and just any advice you have to folks about how to, yes, as we approach the limit, the risk goes up, as Peter likes to say, and as is evident. But at the same time, if we do it in a organized fashion, like you just suggested, the risk isn't that high. So just comment a little bit about, how to think about that. It's probably as much a mental issue as anything else, how to think about the go, no go part as you start to say, well, can I go through this corner 3 miles an hour faster?
So the first thing that kind of comes to mind there is that point in the corner where you go to throttle. And if you go to throttle and then you find yourself having to ease back out of the throttle because you're about to drive off the edge of the track, you probably went to throttle too soon. Or this seems a little bit counterintuitive, you may have overslowed. And because if you think about it, if you come into a corner, let's say the minimum speed through this corner here is, let's say it's 50 miles an hour, okay? If in the middle of the corner here, you kind of go, okay, I'm going to get to power now, and you get the power, and then you find out that you're washing out here, is it because you were going too fast and you got to throttle too soon? Or is it because your min speed could be 53 miles an hour? By starting to accelerate from 53, you're not accelerating quite so hard, but because you slow down, your sensometer in your body says, we got grip, we got traction, let's use it. And you go to power so hard that you cause the car to understeer or maybe oversteer. And now you come out of the corner running out of track. So maybe that's a little tangent from your question, Bill, but I find that a lot of drivers create an artificially low limit. And that's the problem, is they've overslowed for the corner, and therefore they're trying to make up for it, and they get back to throttle, and then they cause the car to oversteer or understeer or whatever. And it tricks the brain into thinking you're driving the car at the limit, but you've actually created this limit that's 3 miles an hour slower than if Lewis Hamilton drove your car through there at 53 miles an hour. So that was the first kind of thing as you started talking about that. And yeah, Peter and I have had some great conversations about that whole limit thing and the go, no go point and all that kind of stuff. Some of it, and to your point about risk, some of it comes back to why are you doing what you're doing? What is your objective? If your objective is to have Roger Penske sign you to a contract and pay you millions of dollars a year to drive, you need to be willing to take some risks and be able to drive over the limit and then dial it back from there. If your goal is to drive your car home, the same car that you drove to the track in the morning, to drive that home at the end of the day, you want to be driving a little bit below that limit and maybe just bumping up, at most, just bumping up against it every now and then. and somebody was going to come along and say, but you're never going to be able to drive the limit unless you go over the limit. And to some extent that's true. It's just how far over the limit that you go. And I've had drivers, instructors, coaches tell me that, if you don't spin off the track every now and then, you're never driving the car at the limit. I don't buy that. If you never make a mistake, meaning you never go offline, I would buy that. I would buy that you're not driving the car at the limit. To me, you need to drive a little bit over the limit and then bring it back. And again, part of that is trusting that. I've had this conversation with drivers, and again, maybe another tangent. I'm going off on tangents here, Bill. So bring me back. I've had drivers who say, "Oh, man, I just don't think I can push it." And what if I spin out? And I go, "How many laps have you done in your life?" "Oh, I've been doing this for 10 years now." "Well, how many laps is that?" "Oh, it's thousands of laps." "How many corners have you driven there?" "Oh, that's I've probably driven 20,000 corners in my life." "How many times have you crashed?" "Once." "Oh, okay." "And how many times have you kind of just, you came into a corner and you made a mistake and you ran wide, but you carried on?" "Oh, a lot more of that." "Okay." So the likelihood is if you keep taking those little tiny bites out of it, and you're more likely to simply just, like I said, make a mess of the corner, run wide, be a little slow coming off the corner, whatever. If you're testing it just with little tiny little bites like that, then you are
Great.
That risk doesn't seem quite so bad when you go, yeah, 1 in 20,000 times I crashed. Okay.
Good stuff. So we have several questions that sort of shift gears a bit. So one is just your favorite coaching experience as a driving coach.
Oh, every time I think that's it, something else comes along. So I've been working with this gentleman driver. He 2.5 years ago had never seen a race car. Maybe he'd seen one, but he didn't know anything about racing. And bought a Cadillac, got invited to go to a Cadillac driving school, and went, "Oh, I'm going to do this." And I first worked with him in December of 2019. That was his first day ever on a racetrack. And in March, he put an LMP2 car on the pole at Sebring for the 12-hour race. And then started the race, led the race. And that was pretty darn satisfying and pretty darn cool. So that was a pretty cool experience. I will say, I've had so many great ones. I remember a very short little working experience with a young woman in her second track day ever at an Audi club event. And, it was just like the light bulb moment, and to the point where, she got out of the car with the massive smile and gave me a hug. And it's like that ranks up there with a pole at Sebring. And, then there was the weekend when I was coaching a fairly well-known actor who raced cars at Le Mans a few years ago. And he was finishing the race at Le Mans. My young protege, Colin Brown, had just won his first NASCAR truck race at Michigan and was calling me from the podium while I was in France. And a flat track motorcycle racer who had been coaching sort of on the mental game of racing won a flat track race of the Springfield Mile. And it's like all in one weekend: Le Mans, flat track motorcycle racer in the dirt, and a NASCAR truck race. Pretty successful weekend. But like I said, the young woman at a club event on her second track day ranks right up there with that. So
great. Well, that captures...
wait a minute. Sorry, Bill. What? My favorite coaching moment right now.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. I'm not sure that stacks up with the others, but we'll take it.
Yeah.
So on that same theme, favorite track to coach at, or favorite track to drive?
The next one. So favorite track to coach at. That's really interesting. So one of the things that makes a track that's a great track for coaching is how much I can see. And Daytona is not the most challenging, difficult, awesome racetrack in the world. But the fact that I can be up in the spotter stand and see 99% of the track makes it a fun coaching track. Coda, being able to get up in that tower and see 80 to 90% of the track from up there, that's pretty cool. And especially now with, like I said, the technology where I can have my iPad, I'm seeing in car, I'm seeing data, and I'm able to see in real life, all that kind of stuff. That's one of the things that makes a great coaching track, I would say. Laguna Seca is an awesome place as well, because you can stand up on the hill and kind of just move back and forth and see 70% of the track. So maybe that's I'd never really thought about this, but what makes my favorite coaching track depends on how much I get to see. My favorite track to drive, yes, the next one. But it's interesting in North America. I'm going to say Mosport, Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. It is so fast. It is so awesome. It is so, when you nail a lap at Mosport, you go, I did my job today. But I love going to Laguna Seca because it's Monterey and it's a beautiful place to go. And I love going to Sebring, not because of the town of Sebring. Sorry, Sebring people, but the track has got so much character with those bumps. And, so then you go to Road America and it's, it's one place where I get to eat bad and eat a brat. And, so I think there's some of that to it. I would say outside of North America, well, I've been going to the Nürburgring a lot lately and Spa, which are just incredible track. But I tell you what, Phillip Island in Australia, what a very, very cool racetrack. And it's on an island. And as you come out of turn 2, you come out of turn 2 and you can see waves splashing up on the beach. And there are kangaroos and koalas around there. So how cool is that? It's an awesome place as well.
Great. Good stuff. So back to someone asking an instructing question, your favorite positive reinforcement tips or language or words when you're trying to, give the student driver or the person you're coaching some positive reinforcement.
So one of my favorite tools of the coach is doing what I call asking right questions. And that is, hey, what went right that session? What did you do well that session? And it's really, it's amazing how much impact that has. First of all, a lot of drivers, it's difficult to get them to answer because all they want to do is point out all the things they've done wrong and what they've got to do better. But if you can really kind of, push them a little bit and say, no, tell me what you did well that session. Because if you can get somebody talking about what they did well, it's reinforcing that, and it's reinforcing the mental programming. And guess what? They're going to do more of that. Mm-hmm. And in fact, sometimes I've actually worked with drivers where it got to the point where I'm convinced that they did so much of the right things because of the confirming feedback I was giving them, that they got to the point where they were doing so much right stuff, they didn't have time to do the stuff that they had to fix. So it kind of, the right outweighed the wrong in that case. So it's that's one of my favorite approaches. I'm a huge believer in giving 3 to 5 times. No, there's no sort of set rule, but more confirming feedback than corrective feedback. People respond. I always say that drivers are like dogs. If you want a dog, you want to train your dog, you train it with treats. You give them lots of rewards. Well, drivers are the same way. If you want somebody to do something more, give them more rewards for what they're doing right. And often that just, they don't have time to do something wrong then.
Right. I love that. I think that's a great tip. I'm going to steal it and use it the next time. So
good. And by the way, Bill, by the way, I really, really appreciate the way that you take some of the things from me and other people and use them.
Okay.
That's confirming feedback.
Okay.
And you're going to do more of it now. So.
Yeah, that's right. I am.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So another shift of gears. Somebody's asking, what was your experience like starting up a podcast? Was that easy or hard, or what did you think? And also, who was your favorite guest when you did that? Now that you've done a bunch of them, I know.
Well, so when I started my podcast, I think I'd listened to like 6 podcasts ever in my life. But, it's one of those things that it sounds like it's going to be popular and people are doing it a lot. And I listened to 6 of them and went, this is kind of cool. I like this. And for me personally, when I started the podcast, there was the main reasons, one of the main reasons for doing it was I knew that I could communicate reasonably well in writing. That's kind of what my default is. And but I knew that I could improve my writing, but I could also really improve my verbal communication. So I thought I want to get better at that. And one of the best ways to do that is to practice it a lot, and especially kind of not under some pressure. There really is no pressure. Nobody's got to listen to this thing. And so I thought, I'm just going to do that. There was also another reason I thought, well, hey, a podcast would be a kind of a good excuse to have some fun conversations with people that some are people that I talk to a lot, but a lot of them were not necessarily people that I did have a chance to talk to a lot. And it's led to me being able to have some conversation with people that I never, ever would have thought I ever would have talked to. So one of my favorite podcasts was, there's Dr. Jerry Lynch and another guy named Al Huang, who wrote a book many years ago called Thinking Body, Dancing Mind. It's my favorite all-time book. And it's kind of one of those books that I just, lesson after lesson after lesson that I got out of this book. And I absolutely love the book. And at some point I found, and there's Bill's got a copy of it as well. I love that book. And so I found contact info for Jerry Lynch. I sent him an email and said, would you be my guest on my podcast? And his response was, absolutely, would love to. So I had this amazing conversation with him on the podcast. That was fantastic. I just did one just recently with Dr. David Ferguson, who's the, a sports physiologist guy at Michigan State's Spartan lab. And they do a lot of testing of working with race drivers around the physical stuff and of driving, and just had a really, really fascinating conversation with him. And then, I have a conversation with guys. I have conversation with Peter Krause, and we just get these cool, fun conversations, and Mike Zemicki and Tom Long. All these really, really great people that I have these fun conversations with. Now, I will say that with my travel schedule, the podcast gets to be a challenge. I'm actually going to take a little bit of a break for a couple months here, but I'll be back at it again soon, because it's a fun excuse to have fun conversations with people.
That's great. So speaking of travel, kind of last question, since we're approaching an hour in. You traveled a lot last year. In fact, I think you were getting on an airplane after we did one of these sessions about a little less than a year ago, actually. So you were going to tracks, going through airports before most anyone else was. And those of us that follow you on Facebook and Instagram love seeing that. So given your experience, and obviously we're all hoping to get back to normal someday, what's your prediction on the new normal as you're back going to tracks this year?
Well, so a few things that come to mind. First of all, as you said, that I started flying my last flight as the lockdown came in. I think it was around March 10th. I came home from Barber Motorsport Park. Yep. And then the first flight after that was the last week of May. And I know that from the last week of May, because I usually fly United, but I switched to Alaska because they were putting empty seats between us. And so I started flying Alaska Airlines at the end of May. And from the last week of May to December 31st, I flew over 200,000 miles on Alaska just in June, July to the end of the year. And then but I also flew some flights on United and on Delta, and I think a couple of flights on Southwest and one on Spirit in that time as well. So yeah, I travel a lot. I remember one of the first flights I took, and I can't remember, might have been the first or second flight I took. I remember going to LAX airport in LA on Friday morning, and it was 9 a.m., 8 a.m. And I remember standing there in the hallway near the gate, and I looked in both directions and didn't see a single person, and thought, this is so weird. This is kind of eerie. And oh, I wish it was like that again. Not for the same reason, but it's gotten, airports are just as jammed as they used to be, and maybe even more, because maybe the airlines have fewer flights, but it seems like they're more jammed even more right now, or maybe they're just more sensitive to it. And yeah, I mean, I've seen my fair share of disrespectful people and other people who have just been absolutely fantastic. I feel like I've been playing Russian roulette over the past year, and kind of feeling like I made it through, because I got my second vaccine shot a week and a half ago or so. Just over a week ago, and feeling like, yep, another week and I'll be as good as it can be. And I'm prepared for COVID vaccine shots once a year, like flu shots. So what's going to be normal? I think one of the things that I think will affect motorsport is one of the things that I think a lot of organizations have found is the online or not in-person driver meetings actually are quite effective. I would say the IMSA drivers meetings are super effective, and it's all just, they send you a document, and you have to read through it. And so I think the way that has evolved, I think that's part of our new normal, is I think the way we manage drivers meetings, I think we can be more efficient with it. I think that, in the DE world, I think a lot of organizations, not all, but a lot of them, have found that the lead follow approach to instructing works super well. And it's another tool. Unlike the only tool we have is an instructor in the car. Now they're solo, we don't have anybody there. I think now we can start to think about more of a transition. So I think that's a really positive thing that's come out of it. I think that, and I'll tell you my own personal experience of doing webinars is the webinar that I did just this past January was the most popular webinar I've ever done. And the number of people that sent me emails beforehand saying, I've never been on a webinar. How exactly, I've signed up for it. How exactly does it work? I think many people have gotten used to this world, the Zoom world or the Teams world or the Google Meeting. We kind of got used to it, and we're much better at communicating through this format. And so I think that's part of it. The other thing is, one of the things that I think has been fantastic is you can't keep us drivers down. The participation in events, some events, and I know it has had some negative, but there's been a lot of positive, and there's been a lot of pent up demand, and it's been really fun to see how people have come back to the sport.
Yep.
Stronger, better than ever.
Great. Well, on that note, let me just reinforce that that's absolutely correct. We had our first event of the year, this past weekend, an absolutely jam-packed, sold-out event. Our upcoming events appear to be looking the same way. So that pent-up demand is definitely there, which all of us involved in the sport really love. But Ross, I really want to personally thank you. This is, you've really offered us some great advice as always, and we really appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. I know I've been taking notes. I'm going to re-listen again and take some more notes. And I will steal lots of your ideas and be happy to quote you in the future. So, keep up the great work. We really all do appreciate it. So thank you. And I will turn it back to Shannon.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Bill. This was really informative and fun. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Ross, on how things have changed and what they'll be like going forward at the track. You were very brave traveling during all that. Just wanted to let everyone know we're going to be making a donation on behalf of Ross, and I will share what charity that is in Porsche, the next Porsche for us. So I want to thank him again. And for May, one of our speakers will be Ray Schaefer, who is with Porsche North America. And if anyone has any questions, shoot us an email. If you're on the call, hit the subscribe button. That way you'll be notified for any upcoming events that we have, and check the website calendar for future details. And thanks for tuning in, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.